When we grow old, our hearts naturally long for the warmth of family, the laughter of grandchildren, the Sunday dinners, the feeling of being needed. These are the images we hold on to. It's no surprise then that many seniors dream of moving closer to their children in their later years. But what if I told you that this dream could quietly turn into a nightmare? This video isn't meant to scare you, but it is meant to open your eyes. Because in today's world, the very thing you believe will bring you peace might actually steal it away. Living near your children might seem like a blessing until it isn't. Resentment, emotional burnout, and even financial strain can silently creep into your golden years, turning what should be your time of rest into a constant negotiation for space, respect, and identity. And before you say, "Not my family," let me assure you, you're not alone in thinking that. Yet story after story, study after study, tells us a deeper truth. So before you pack up and move across the country, or just across town, pause with me. Let's look closer at the hidden realities behind this decision. And while you're here, I want to hear from you. Are you currently living near your children, or considering it? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts or concerns. And if you find this topic important, subscribe now, because what we talk about here just might change your life. Ready to take a hard look at something no one wants to talk about? Let's begin. Just promise me one thing. Keep an open mind. Number 1. The story of Edna and the unspoken expectations. Edna was 72 when she left her peaceful condo in Arizona to move closer to her daughter, Karen, in Chicago. She had no major health issues, loved her quiet mornings, and had a close-knit group of friends. But as the years passed, loneliness crept in. Her daughter called often, encouraging her to come live nearby. "It'll be good for the kids to see you more, Mom," she said, "and we'll be there if you ever need anything." Edna imagined holiday dinners together, watching her grandkids grow up and feeling useful again. So she sold her place, said goodbye to her old life, and moved into a small apartment 5 blocks away from Karen. At first, it was exactly what she hoped for. Sunday brunches, birthday parties, and even the occasional sleepover with her grandkids. But slowly, something began to change. Karen's tone became sharper. The visits became less about joy and more about help, driving the kids to soccer, babysitting at the last minute, helping with errands. Edna didn't mind at first. She wanted to be helpful, but she noticed something unsettling. When she declined to help, her daughter grew distant. There were no outright arguments, just a quiet sense of disappointment, guilt, and unspoken obligation that weighed heavier with time. One day, after a week of babysitting through her own flu, Edna sat down and asked herself, "Is this the retirement I imagined?" What Edna experienced isn't rare. Living near adult children often comes with silent expectations. Expectations that aren't malicious but are real. Parents become the go-to backup. Their time, once theirs to enjoy, is now a shared resource. Worse, when a parent tries to assert boundaries, it can be seen as selfish or ungrateful. But let's be clear, wanting peace, space, and autonomy in your later years is not selfish, it's healthy. And this raises a question I'd love for you to answer in the comments. Have you ever felt pressured, directly or indirectly, into becoming a support system rather than being supported? Let's talk about it. Because the more we speak openly about these experiences, the more empowered we become to protect our well-being. Stick with me. This is just the beginning. The next point might surprise you even more. Number 2, the illusion of emotional security and the loneliness that follows. Picture this. You've moved to be near your children. You're in the same city, maybe even the same neighborhood. You think, now I won't be alone. But weeks pass, then months. Your days are quiet. Your phone doesn't ring as often as you thought it would, and visits become short and rushed. You start to wonder, did I make a mistake? This isn't just a sad story. It's a common psychological trap. Studies from the Institute on Aging have shown that seniors who move closer to their children often expect increased emotional connection and interaction. Yet, surprisingly, 4 out of 10 end up reporting greater loneliness than before they moved. Why? Because physical proximity does not guarantee emotional closeness. This is what psychologists call a proximity paradox. We assume that being nearby will naturally lead to stronger bonds. But in reality, the modern world moves fast. Your children are juggling work, raising their own kids, dealing with mortgage payments, and battling their own stress. Their availability doesn't magically increase just because you're around the corner. Worse, when you're close, but not emotionally connected, it creates a different kind of loneliness. One that's sharp, one that whispers, "They're so close, why don't they visit?" That kind of pain can be deeper than the solitude of distance. And here's the hidden cost. Because you've uprooted your old life, your old friends, your familiar places, you may find yourself with no support system nearby. You gave up a known world for a promised connection, and now you're more isolated than ever. So ask yourself this honestly. Are you seeking closeness, or are you seeking connection? Because they are not the same thing. I want to know your experience. If you've ever felt lonely even while living near family, share your story in the comments. You're not alone, and your words might help someone else feel seen. Stay with me. In the next part, we'll explore something even more surprising: how this decision could be quietly draining your finances. Number 3. The financial drain no one warns you about. When Harold retired at 68, he was confident he'd done everything right. A solid pension, no debt, and enough savings to live modestly but comfortably. His son, Mark, lived 2 states away, and after a particularly rough winter and a few health scares, Mark began encouraging Harold to move closer. "You'll be safer here, Dad," he said, "and we'll be around if you need anything." So Harold made the move. At first, everything seemed fine. He found a small apartment near Mark's house. But what began as a simple relocation quietly grew into a cascade of unexpected costs. Rent in the new area was almost double what he paid before. His health insurance didn't cover all local providers. Even small things, like holiday gifts for the grandkids or chipping in for family dinners, added up. Then came the favors. "Dad, can you help cover Emma's school trip? Can you co-sign for this loan? It's just temporary." Harold, like many parents, said yes, because saying no felt like betrayal. But within 2 years, his savings were half what they once were. And no one in the family really understood the silent erosion happening behind his steady smile. This scenario is far more common than you might think. According to a report by Merrill Lynch and AgeWave, nearly 60% of parents aged 60 and up are providing ongoing financial support to adult children or grandchildren, often at the expense of their own retirement security. The problem isn't always manipulation. More often, it's unspoken obligation. The closer you are, the harder it becomes to draw boundaries. You see the struggles, the emergencies, the missed bills, and your instinct is to help. But here's the reality. Your retirement is not a backup fund for your children's lives. And when you exhaust your resources trying to prop up theirs, you risk losing your independence entirely. That means fewer choices later on, whether it's in healthcare, housing, or even day-to-day living. Let's talk about this. Have you ever felt financially stretched since moving closer to your family? Or pressured to pitch in more than you expected? Share your story in the comments, and let's shed light on this silent sacrifice. Because the next point might be the most personal one yet, the loss of identity that comes from being just grandma or just dad again. And it runs deeper than most people realize. Number 4, the quiet loss of identity and the role you didn't sign up for. Imagine waking up every day not as you, but as a role. Grandma, dad, the babysitter, the emergency driver. It starts subtly, picking up the grandkids once or twice a week. Then it becomes daily. Then you're cooking, cleaning, organizing birthday parties, even managing the dog when your children are out of town. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you disappear. This isn't just a complaint. It's a real psychological shift. In developmental psychology, there's something called role engulfment. It's when a single identity, like parent or caregiver, becomes so dominant that it overshadows all other aspects of who you are. You stop being seen as an individual with needs, goals, and limits. You become service. This happened to Joan, a retired teacher who once traveled the world, volunteered at her local museum, and led a book club. When she moved near her 2 sons in Seattle, she was excited to spend more time with her grandkids. But within a year, Joan was burned out. The museum was too far to get to regularly, the book club faded away, and her passport stayed in a drawer. She wasn't unhappy because she hated her family. She was unhappy because she missed herself. When seniors live too close to adult children, it's easy for boundaries to blur. The line between being helpful and being used, even unintentionally, can fade. What starts as a favor becomes a routine. And when you try to step back, you're met with confusion, maybe even guilt-tripping. But Mom, we need you. Let's be clear, supporting your family is admirable, but only if it's done with mutual respect and clear boundaries. I want to hear your voice on this. In what ways have you felt like your identity changed or was lost after moving close to your children? Did your sense of self shrink or grow? Share your story in the comments. It could be the mirror someone else needs. Because in the next section, we'll dive into the hardest part of all, when relationships that were once warm begin to crack under the weight of too much closeness. Stay with me. This next part is the emotional core of it all. Number 5. When love turns to tension, the erosion of family bonds. James and Carol had always been close to their daughter, Rachel. Holiday memories, weekly calls, warm letters. There was no drama, no history of conflict. When they moved to be near her in Oregon, it felt like the natural next step. We'll grow even closer, Carol told a friend. It'll be like the old days again. But something shifted. Rachel was busy, very busy. Her job was demanding. The kids were in every activity imaginable, and her husband traveled often. At first, the couple chalked up her stress to bad timing. Then the phone calls became shorter, the conversations more strained, and every get-together seemed to end in frustration. Small criticisms about how they loaded the dishwasher, how they handled the kids, how they hovered. One day, after a particularly tense dinner, Carol whispered to James, "I think we were closer when we were farther." This is not uncommon. According to a 2022 study from the American Psychological Association, 28% of older adults who moved closer to their adult children reported a decline in emotional closeness within 2 years. The reason? Familiarity breeds pressure. When you're around someone constantly, the natural imperfections of everyday life, moods, habits, even opinions, start to rub the wrong way. Worse, the generational gap becomes glaring. You may hold different views on parenting, lifestyle, or values, and suddenly, every conversation feels like a minefield. You're walking on eggshells, afraid to speak your truth. The love is still there, but the warmth has been replaced by tension. And here's the deeper tragedy. Many seniors blame themselves. They feel like intruders in the very lives they moved to be part of. They say things like, "Maybe I'm just old-fashioned," or, "I guess I should keep my opinions to myself." That self-silencing corrodes confidence and deepens isolation, even in a house full of people. Let me ask you something deeply personal. Have you ever noticed that since being closer to your children, the relationship feels more fragile than it used to? Are there things you don't say now, for fear of setting something off? Drop your story in the comments. Your courage could help someone else find clarity. Because in the final section, we'll talk about something most people overlook, the unexpected freedom that comes from not living close to your family, and why distance, when done right, can actually make your relationship stronger. Don't miss it. Number 6, the power of distance, and why it might save your most precious relationships. It might sound strange, maybe even ungrateful, to say that distance from your children could actually strengthen your bond with them. But for many seniors, this is not just true. It's life-changing. Let's look at 2 neighbors, Robert and Elaine. Robert lives 2 blocks from his son. He's constantly on call. Groceries, last-minute babysitting, dog-sitting while the family's on vacation. The closeness, once a comfort, has become a quiet obligation. He never feels fully off the clock. Elaine, on the other hand, lives 1,000 miles from her daughter. But every Sunday at 10 a.m., they video chat for an hour. Once a year, Elaine flies out to visit, and for a week, they do nothing but enjoy each other's company. No errands, no chores, just long talks, shared meals, and laughter. Elaine once told me, "That 1 week brings us closer than a whole year of living next door ever could." This isn't an isolated case. In fact, research from the University of Michigan shows that long-distance parents who maintain regular, intentional contact with their adult children often report higher satisfaction in the relationship than those who live nearby but interact passively or out of obligation. Why? Because distance forces intentionality. When you only have a few days or a weekly call, you make it count. There's less room for conflict over day-to-day routines and more space for appreciation. You stay in the role of parent, not errand runner or substitute nanny. And more importantly, you stay in your own life. You keep your routines, your friends, your independence. You live on your terms, something many older adults underestimate until it's gone. Now, I want to hear from you. If you live far from your children, do you feel that your relationship is stronger for it? Or do you wish you were closer? Share in the comments. We learn best from each other's real stories. Coming up next, the final thoughts that tie all of this together, and a message I hope every senior will take to heart before making one of the biggest decisions of their later years. Stick around. It matters. So now we return to the question we began with. Could living close to your children in old age be the biggest mistake of your life? For some, the answer may still be no. Every family is different, and for a few, proximity brings joy, connection, and a sense of purpose. But for many others, the reality is far more complex, filled with unspoken expectations, emotional distance, financial strain, and a quiet erosion of identity. Here's the truth no one says out loud. Your later years are not a time to prove your usefulness. They are a time to reclaim your freedom. You've spent decades sacrificing for others, raising children, building a career, caring, giving. Now, finally, this chapter belongs to you. And it should be lived on your terms, not dictated by proximity, convenience, or guilt. If your children truly love you, and most do, they'll understand when you say, I need space to be myself. I want to be close emotionally, not necessarily physically. I am here for you, but I'm also still here for me. Distance doesn't mean disconnection. It can mean respect, autonomy, balance, and sometimes it's the very thing that keeps love intact. Before you move across the country or down the street, pause, reflect, ask yourself not just what you're running to, but what you might be giving up. And if this message resonated with you, if it gave you clarity or even just made you think, then please subscribe. Because these are the conversations we need to have, the ones that challenge easy answers and honor the wisdom you've earned over a lifetime. Now, tell me in the comments, what do you believe is the ideal balance between closeness and independence as we age? I want to hear your truth. Thank you for staying until the end. Your story isn't over. It's just entering its most powerful chapter yet.